interesting surprises for me in reading this gospel. One of those that I was introduced to when I went to Israel a couple of years ago in a special way, because we always read about Zacchaeus climbing the sycamore tree, and we hear another story about a prophet who set out as a dresser of sycamores. It's like, how do you dress a sycamore? Like, for Halloween, I mean, you put clothes on it or something. We have an idea of sycamores like we have on the river here. But he said, no. He said, sycamore tree is a tree that produces fruit, sort of like a fig there, and to dress it, guys have to climb it, and while the fruit's still young, they have to score it, kind of like you do, those of you might be into growing heroin or something, with poppies, you got to score those things to, nobody does that here. Okay, good. Anyway, do the same thing to these fig-like things on the sycamore tree as a way of dressing them. And that was one of the surprises. The other surprise is, how many of us heard the story today about this great sinner? Probably most of us did. And that's what surely the people said. That they knew he was a sinner. It's like, did you hear it say anything about that when Jesus introduced him? No, Zacchaeus was a tax collector and a rich man. That's the only two comments on it. It's the people who say he's a sinner. So we want to get to that shortly. Because we're looking at today our need, if you will, to open, as Zacchaeus does, a house to the Lord. How much effort do you and I go through in terms of opening our house, ourselves, to the Lord? How much effort do we really make? We can make lots of effort. We can make a lot of effort. We can make the kind of effort like this guy who was coming to a guy's farm one day and he saw a beautiful scene out across the fence. And he thought he wanted to get over and see it. He got to the fence and it said, "Private property, do not enter." Well, he won't mind. I'm going to go over there and get this picture that I saw. And so he climbs over the fence and he goes to this pine tree out there where he can get a beautiful setting. And there's a sign on the pine tree. It says, "I hope you can climb that fence in 6.5 seconds because the bull can reach it in 7 seconds." He had a lot of motivation to get back to that gate. But you say, well, what kind of motivation do we have? What kind of motivation? Should be enough motivation just to say, because it's the Lord himself. And that's what Zacchaeus does. He says he's a short man who seeks to discover who this Jesus is. And so he's willing to go through a bit of effort in climbing the tree. Why should he? He's rich. He's got everything he needs. By the way, sometimes people see this idea of sinner, and we do judge. Now, what's the common judgment about lawyers? Don't hear too many good stories sometimes. Like, why not? Or sometimes now, even about doctors, it's like, well, no, they do it because they're, it's the way of getting wealthy, kind of. Like, you automatically assume these people are wealthy and doing it for the wrong thing. And yet, how many of us honestly do not know really good lawyers and really good doctors and dentists even, it's like, we allow judgments to be made simply because of who or what someone does. Certainly many good people in these professions, and certainly Zacchaeus may have been like that. Zacchaeus may have been in a good position with the kings and say, hey, I'm getting ready to appoint a tax collector down there in Jericho. That's good, rich ground because it's a place where all the caravans go through, and so there's going to be a lot of taxes there. And Zacchaeus may well have looked and said, hey, some people say, well, if I don't do it, someone else will. That's in their report to get rich. But he also may, like some lawyers, say, if I don't do it, they need good tax collectors. Because we need taxes, right? I mean, that's an honest, good profession. We need to collect taxes. Every country needs that. If I take this job, I can make sure that it stays honest, that people do not be overtaxed. And that's what I'm interested in, because when you read the rest of it, what does it say about it? It says, when he encounters Jesus, he says, Lord, I am going to give half of what I have to the poor. Note one. That's a voluntary gift. The second part says, and if I have defrauded anybody, I'd be happy to give him 4 times. Chances are there's not going to be anybody able to come against him on that score then. So he's got that base covered, but I know what I'm going to get. And that's half. So we look at these two elements. The effort of climbing the tree, and then what is the response? What is the response? And I'm afraid sometimes people read these kinds of stories, these kind of gospels, and they say, well, that's why I don't want to get to know the Lord, because if I do, he's going to expect a lot out of me. It's like, he's going to expect me to tithe 10 times over. He's going to expect me to, to sell everything and leave and be a missionary somewhere. It's like, I don't really want to get that close to him. I just want to know that I'm okay, I'm a good person, I'll make it to heaven. Well, really? What are we here for? Certainly to get to heaven. But we want to go to heaven because we want to be with the Lord. If we don't want to be with him on this earth, why in the world do we want to be with him for eternity? I would think, like Zacchaeus, you and I would say, yes, I want to meet the Lord. And if I want to meet the Lord, then we say, okay, how much effort am I making? Sometimes good acquaintances happen just by happenstance. Sometimes we got to say, I want to get to know that person. What can I do that? How can I do that? And we make it a point to get to meet them. So how do we do that with Jesus? Well, there's really no shortcuts except he's already in your life. He's already there. He's just saying, open your door up. Make that effort. I want to be in your house tonight. I want to sup with you. I want to be one. That's what sharing supper with is. I want to be one with you. Am I willing to open my heart even more to him? How do I do that? Time for prayer. What kind of time do I take for prayer? We listened to a Muslim woman this week. She's talking about their prayer life, and you always hear this. If you go to Israel, so you hear these horns go off every 5 times a day. It's like a call to prayer, just a reminder to people. Here, I put a bell in the church in one of the towns I was in. We got all kinds of complaints, and we rang the bell, a couple times a day. I was like, oh, just wait. But anyway, she's talking about her prayer life. She says, first prayer must be before sunrise. Must be before that. So it doesn't matter how late you work, what you've done, you've got to be up and have time for prayer. And not just say the simple line, there's one God, and Allah is his prophet, but rather it's a reminder that start with that and take time for prayer. And so you have 5 times a day to really pray, to enter into a relationship with the Lord. And I wonder, wow, how many of us are willing to make that kind of effort? Do we take time for prayer? Normally we would say, well, sure, we should pray when we get up. We should pray when we go to bed. There's 2 times. And we should pray each time we at least have a meal and the rosary. So there should be 5 times at least during that day that you and I also take time to pray. Are we making that effort? How do we open up our hearts to the Lord in terms of getting to know what he wants to say to us? Zacchaeus, I had to listen. Zacchaeus, I need to come to your house today. We have to make time to hear the Lord as well as taking time to talk to him. So make that prayer time also quiet time, to be willing to listen to what the Lord is saying. You notice he did not say, Zacchaeus, I want you to go sell half of what you got. The Lord didn't do that. He said, I want to come and have supper with you. Zacchaeus has a personal response, and that becomes the other side. How do I know if I have really met the Lord? How do I know that I am growing in this relationship with him? One sure way of checking it out is to say, how well do I do in terms of the corporal works of mercy? During this year of mercy, we're especially focusing on our need to look at those corporal works of mercy. How am I doing? Zacchaeus says, I'm going to give half of what I have to the poor. That's a pretty good step. I'm not suggesting you all do that, but God calls you to it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. He seems to nudge you towards some sort of what the world might say is excessive sacrifice. No, if it's from the Lord, it's a good thing. If it's from the Lord, he's saying, hey, we're going to go someplace together. We're going places. Today, as we continue this journey, again, don't be afraid to make the effort to meet the Lord. Don't be afraid to take time to see him and to grow in your prayer life with him. And don't be afraid of what he's going to ask of you. Look at ourselves and say, do I take time for prayer? And am I responding in terms of looking at the corporal works of mercy in my own life?